Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this Aegon Global Pensions webinar. My name is Martijn Tans. The topic of today is expatriate pensions and employee commitment. I'm joined today by Thurstan Robinson and Mark Green, who have written a white paper on this topic. Thurstan is an international research analyst and communications manager, and Mark is an international product manager for defined contribution solutions. They both work at Aegon Global Pensions. We will have a discussion on the paper that they have written, and as we have the discussion, if you have a question that you would like to ask the panelists, please feel free to use the chat function, and I will pass on the questions to Mark and Thurstan. So Thurstan, I think we're going to start with you. Can you tell me what was it that made you write this paper?
I think there are two main reasons why we decided to write this paper. We speak a lot with multinational companies about how they manage their pensions, what kind of issues they face with different pension plans internationally, with coordination, asset management, all the issues that come together for a multinational company with dealing with all these plans. And during the course of these conversations, usually somewhere nearer the end, the subject of expatriate pension plans often arises. How to deal with this group of individuals who require retirement provision, but who are not working in their home country, and who are often highly valuable individuals for a company. Mm-hmm. So this is just a topic that arises, and people say, wouldn't it be wonderful if we could have a single plan that would deal with it? But we find it very difficult, and with a considerable quantity of these companies, they just say, in fact, we find it so difficult that what we do is we just give them extra salary and say, you look after your retirement provision yourself. This is something that, as a pension provider, we don't see as being a suitable solution to the problem, so to speak. And it's also, not just as a pension provider, it's just if you're looking to provide somebody with a retirement benefit, just providing additional cash is not necessarily the answer. And I think if you can show the next slide, Aegon recently completed its retirement readiness survey for 2012. This was a survey with 9,000 employees were approached in 9 countries. It's a very robust data set. They were asked a whole range of questions about retirement, their attitudes to retirement, what they were doing. And the slide that we're showing is just one of the results that we got from that. And it's showing employees across the board, across this range of 9 countries, are by and large feeling pretty pessimistic about retirement. And this is even more so, I'd say, for expatriate employees, because these are people who are not in their home country. They're working in a strange environment. And certainly for a group of these expatriate employees, they cannot depend upon a state pension, or at least the state pension that they may receive will be lower than that of their fellow compatriots who are working back home. So this is something that is an issue. So that's one of the reasons for writing the paper. And the other reason for writing the paper is really very simple. Mark Green, who's sitting next to me, joined Aegon Global Pensions about 1.5 years ago. And he'd worked previously as a consultant for many years, but he's also worked as an academic, and he's carried out academic research on employee commitment. So we thought this was a perfect combination, that he should combine his prowess with working with DC and with employee commitment.
Okay. Well, Mark, so maybe then you can tell us a little bit about employee commitment and what's relevant about that topic.
Yeah, why it matters. What we think of when we think of employee commitment from an academic perspective, we've got 30 or 40 years worth of research which has formed the view that's set out in this slide as to a sort of a chain of causation, a link between what an employer does in terms of supporting the employees, which can take many forms, giving good work-life balance, pay and conditions, obviously pensions as well. That level of support, perceived support from the employer, results in staff engagement, employee engagement, commitment. Engagement and commitment, two terms that are used quite interchangeably, and there's within academic circles quite a lot of debate about what constitutes engagement, what's commitment, and the two, for the purpose of this research, we're using the two completely interchangeably, as many academics do, and saying, okay, looking at employee commitment, what can that result in, and what we see is where in my other hat I call citizenship behavior, which is the good citizen, the employee who is very much aligned with the employer in terms of thinks that the employer's objectives are his or her objectives. And so they behave in ways that are very, very beneficial to the organisation. They might, for example, cover for colleagues who are off sick. They might work unpaid overtime to get projects done and delivered on time because they feel they really want to ensure that the clients get the service from the employer that they feel the clients should be receiving. So you get very much behaviour patterns that are very, very beneficial to the performance of the actual business, which then feeds through obviously into increased profitability and competitiveness.
And so the idea is to use this framework in the context of pension provision?
Yes, that's right, yes. Within the survey, we actually included 6 questions that are classic questions for measuring the commitment or the engagement of the employees. And we were then able to correlate that with the results that we were seeing for the pension provision and so on.
Okay, so I think we'll be seeing some of those results later. I think for now, I think the purpose of the paper is to look at employee commitment in the context of expatriates, of mobile employees. So Thurstan, maybe you can elaborate a little bit on that and how your thinking is along the lines of what matters for expatriates.
Yeah. Well, I referred to it in when I was speaking earlier. If we move to the next slide immediately, I can. This is a fairly classic division of expatriate employees, and this is how most multinational companies will have. Maybe they split them into 3 groups or 4 groups, but fundamentally, some expatriates will be sent abroad for a short amount of time, and they can stay in their home retirement plan. Now, then there's not a problem with their pension as such, so we won't really be talking about that now. The next level of the pyramid is permanent moves. So these are people who are moving from one country to another country, but they can be provided for in the pension plan of the host country to which they're moving. Now, it's not that these individuals, they may have different expectations of a pension, so they may require assistant education, everything like that, but the actual pension plan into which they're being placed will apply to all the employees in that country. So the pension plan as such is not an issue, although the individuals themselves will require some support and education. But if we look at the peak of this pyramid, this is the global nomads. Now, typically these are maybe 1% to 2% of the expatriate employees of a company. Mm-hmm. Although obviously some companies, oil exploration companies spring to mind, then a lot of them will be in the peak of the pyramid. But these are people who have really no home country and no host country. They're people who will move from one country to another. They're typically very high value employees for the company. But it's more difficult to find a place for them to have a plan. And so they require an international retirement plan. And then a lot of other issues come into play. They cannot expect to receive a state pension as such, other than what they may have built up previously. And then the other issue is that lots of these people are not thinking about their retirement, about their pensions. This is something that we see across the board. Younger people in particular don't think about their pensions. And especially as an expat, the number one concerns when you're speaking to these HR managers as well, they need to get the health benefits, they need to get the risk benefits. These are the immediate things that require attention. If you get that wrong, you're in trouble, and you're expatriate, you won't attract these people. They need to know that if something happens to a member of their family when they're abroad, if they're taking their family with them, that they will get immediate medical attention, for example. Now, a pension is not something that requires immediate attention, yes. So it often falls down the list of priorities.
But what you're saying is that it's important.
But it's important. I mean, pensions are important, and this is the thing. I mean, there's a slide that we said earlier about pessimism about retirement.
Right.
These pensions require attention. They require attention throughout your working life, and for these people, it's something that's often, as I said, sometimes a cash benefit is offered instead. And from the company point of view, that's also not sufficient. They offer retirement benefits for a reason, and offering cash in lieu is not a retirement benefit as such. It's often not spent on saving for retirement. So you're not getting you're not really providing the retirement benefit. And for these individuals, when they come to realise that they have an insufficient savings, that in itself can be an issue.
Do you see that the awareness of this issue is growing or not so much?
Well, I think some of the companies we've spoken with, they're aware of the issue. It's interesting to see, as again with pensions across the board. Sometimes some people are very receptive to the message that they need to save for a pension. Some individuals aren't. So there's always the question of how can you get people to appreciate what you're doing for them. But a lot of these companies are aware that they need to do something for these individuals.
And one of the points in the paper is employee commitment is relevant for expats as well, and is a topic to look at.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So Mark, maybe you want to tell us a little bit about the results that have come out of the survey. And
sure. Yes. I think when looking at the survey, it's important to remember this is 9,000 people across 9 different countries. So we've got a very large population that we're actually looking at. So the results that we're getting through can actually identify small but significant differences with a high level of confidence. And so what we see here, for example, is one of the findings from the survey. We're looking at the commitment of the employees in different countries. And you can see that German employees and Swedish employees have the highest levels of commitment in the survey that we looked at. They have a commitment level 61%, obviously out of possible 100. And sadly, as a Brit, it pains me to reveal that UK employees have a level of commitment of barely above 50% by comparison. Maybe this says something about why Germany is the dominant economic force in Europe today. But what's important is you can think, right, okay, well, 62%, 50%, not a lot of difference perhaps. But that's where it comes down to the importance of, it's a very large survey. So relatively small, apparently small differences are being measured very accurately with a high degree of confidence, and we can say these are real significant differences.
Do you have an idea, sorry to interrupt, why those differences are there between the countries?
It's very, very difficult to judge why the difference arises. What we're actually trying to measure is what's. Within the questionnaire, we weren't looking for underlying reasons because partly when you ask people questions and to articulate reasons, they try to help you by making up reasons. They try to think, what does this person want to hear, and give reasons around that. So we simply asked factual questions to get a measure of the levels of commitment and the pension provision and so on. Okay. If you want to have a look at the next slide, what we also saw was, as well as differences across countries, there were significant differences by age. And this obviously looks like a very complicated slide, spaghetti lines going every which way. Yep. So what we thought, we'd actually simplify matters a little if we cut out some of the countries and focus on 3 that exhibit the trends that we see. They're exemplars of each of the patterns. So first pattern that we see, if we look at the dotted line there, we have the global picture that by and large, as you get older, you are likely to be a more committed employee. I see it rising from the 18-year-olds through to the people at or about retirement age, from around about the mid-50s up to about the 60% mark on average. But that average, as you'd have seen from the previous slide, it masks a whole host of different patterns. So for example, Germany, as an example, is consistently higher levels of commitment across all of the ages up until you get close to that retirement age. And then you see a quite dramatic fall off in the levels of employee commitment amongst German employees. Contrast that with the UK, which is consistently lower than the average, but shows a pattern of a very dramatic dip in commitment amongst the people in their mid-40s and early 50s, followed by a rise in commitment at the time when commitment of German employees is falling. Again, we can only speculate what the underlying causes for that might be, but these are very different patterns, which we think would be very important for a global HR manager when looking at the population of employees that they have working for them, being aware that their German employees, for example, are going to be really committed until they get closer to retirement, and then maybe if you don't intervene, if you don't act as an employer, you could see this falling off of commitment amongst your German employees. Conversely, if you've got Brits in your workforce, then maybe you need to be thinking, well, if I don't do something, I could be seeing my commitment from my critical British employees falling off as they get into their 40s and 50s, when perhaps their experience is what I really need most. Right. So identifying these different patterns enables the global HR manager to act to counter falls in the commitment.
Okay, and do you see companies using that idea? Of course, this research is new, so but in general terms, is that something that you see companies using?
Yes. What we've been doing in the academic work that I've been doing, you obviously you also consult with clients of the university, and you talk with them about the patterns of commitment in their employees. You could actually replicate this kind of data at a company level, and you see, are there patterns and are there, as a result, actions that you can take to address that? And at a company level, you might work on a by location basis, which obviously in this global survey we haven't done.
Sure. Okay, and then we have a question coming in from the audience about the survey. The question is this a survey of expats specifically or not? Can you tell a little bit about it?
It's a survey of employees in the countries. Okay. I think it's important to understand, I mean, around the table today we have two expats and a local national. If we're looking from a Dutch perspective, and within the Aegon Global Pensions team, we have a number of expats in our team. It's not hard to identify from within the team who has the British background, who has a Dutch background, who has a German background, etc., Indian background. We have diverse range of backgrounds. Expats they reflect the culture in which they've grown up. There are certain patterns that expats have that are common across all expats. Perhaps more openness to experience new cultures and live and work in new cultures, and embrace those new cultures. But nevertheless, you don't lose your roots.
Sure.
Even a global nomad, as Thurstan described.
Right. So what you're saying is that in an expat population, you will have people from different backgrounds and nationalities, and that's how this research is relevant, because
exactly.
it addresses that very issue.
It's relevant for domestic or expat situations. Your French expat population and your German expat population and your British expat population at heart will behave to a greater or lesser extent as French, British and German.
Sure. And then going back to, I think, an answer that you gave earlier, Thurstan, there's another question from the audience that relates to this. Is in dealing with expats, I think you said that people could be using a host pension plan, but also a home country plan.
Yes.
So the question from the audience is, how do you recommend handling the duplication of benefits that comes with that? So if there's the two plans, so I don't know if you or Mark want to address that.
Well, typically it would be you typically use this as an either-or situation. So if you have somebody who's on a short-term assignment, you would tend to try to keep them in a home country plan because they're going to be very shortly back in the home country working back amongst their fellow workers who have never left.
Okay.
Somebody who's on a much longer term assignment at a single location, then the optimal solution could well be to move them into that host country local plan.
Okay.
But you would not typically mix the two.
Okay.
They're really suitable solutions for different types of
groups.
assignment.
Okay, that makes sense. All right, so then I'd like to move on to, I think, a key part of this discussion is, we've spoken about pensions generally and for expats. We've talked about commitment, and you showed some results of commitment levels in countries and different age groups. I guess the key question that then comes up is, to what extent do pensions impact employee commitment? Because that's of course a key consideration. So Thurstan, what has your research revealed?
No, but I think if we go directly to the next slide, it's a very interesting slide, and if you look at this, it's actually quite a dramatic slide. What you can see is a 20% plus increase showing there in employee commitment when that is measured against the level of optimism about expected pensions. And that's almost too good to be true, and in a way it is too good to be true. Mark and his ex-colleague at the University of Bath went through the numbers, and they've looked at what the effect of retirement actually is, of optimism about retirement on employee commitment. Now there's a lot of additional features that are hidden in this here. A company that provides a good pension plan would tend to be a good company. If you think of the slide that Mark showed at the beginning, saying about supportive companies have engaged employees, and engaged or committed employees give more back to the company. Well, this is almost that, just embodied in a slide.
Sure.
So what you're seeing here is it's a combination of factors. But if they try to pull out the effect that optimism about retirement has, it's probably about 7% of that 20% plus increase can be laid at the door of feeling optimistic about retirement. And that is a very significant number.
Can you maybe just in a little bit more detail describe what this chart is?
Well, on the chart, I mean, if you look at the low end and the low end, that differs by country, and again you have a spread between I suppose Germany somewhere near the top, and pretty near the bottom we have the UK and Spain, I think it is, and that's those who are very pessimistic about the level of pension that they can expect to receive, and the level of optimism, which is the axis on the left, is lower. So obviously those who are pessimistic about retirement are less committed to the company. Okay. And as you see, as they get more optimistic about their ability to retire in comfort, they become more committed.
Okay. So and I think interestingly, you could say that this is a spaghetti chart too, but it has much more of a common element over the countries, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so and that's a very good point to make. I mean, we saw employee commitment was up and down across between the different countries, but optimism about retirement affects commitment. Doesn't matter what nationality you are. That's what this says.
So that's a key. So this looks like a key chart to me. So Mark, what does this mean in practical terms for a company that is dealing with this?
Well, in practical terms, if we think back to the causal link, the chain, you have a supportive employer results in there being committed or engaged employees who behave in a way that is very much to the advantage of the company in terms of the going the extra mile, doing things that benefit the company and its performance and its appearance to the public and to consumers. So what you get is a competitive advantage, which we tried to capture in a slide, sort of like just to try to be a little bit sort of tongue-in-cheek here. But for those of you who don't recognise this still, it's actually taken from a video of Usain Bolt destroying the world and Olympic records in Beijing 4 years ago. And the idea is to emphasise that if you think Usain Bolt, the collective memory, he seems to have been just like miles and miles ahead. And what actually we see here is he's about 2 meters ahead of everybody else. Which, if you think this is a 100-metre race, 2 metres, that's a 2% advantage. That's what being 2% better than the competition in a competitive market looks like. You're the Usain Bolt that everybody fears when they find themselves up against you in competition. And that's what we see pensions as offering to the employer. If you've got that, as Thurstan said, 7% potential extra commitment, if you can create a feeling of optimism in your employees that they're in a good pension plan and it will deliver them a comfortable retirement, you've got 7% to play with. If Usain Bolt was 7% better than the rest of the competition, there'd be only him in this picture. You know, the rest of the people will be out of sight, behind. And so, you know, if you can harness that extra commitment, you don't have to harness all of it and direct it specifically to profit, but it results in significantly improving your competitive position against everybody else. It's a competitive world we're in, and having employees who are little bit better, little bit more committed to you, gives you that edge over the competition.
Okay, so even if Thurstan, I think you said in the beginning that other support for expats may be more urgent and may look more important, maybe they are more important, but your message is that pensions has a significant impact on commitment and should be considered.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just those things are of immediate urgency. But what this shows is that pensions have a very important effect on your levels of commitment.
Right. And just to check, so this is an assertion that is valid in the context of expats. You know, what is the topic of today, right. But this would hold for pensions across the board as well.
That's right.
Yeah, I mean, part of what we think is very important is that people take the view that pensions for expats should be viewed as pensions.
Right.
This is not something unique and in a box on its own somewhere in the corner. This is something that should be front and centre as part of your overall strategy.
Right. So international retirement plans for mobile employees should be looked at as pension provision in the
exactly.
sort of in the solid sense of the word, and looked at it in that context.
That's right.
Okay. So when we do that, and you have done that in the paper as well, looking at expatriate pensions, what can you say about defined benefit and defined contribution as two sort of systems that we see in pensions, in the regular pensions world as well?
Well, I think you'll see when we looked at the chart about optimism about retirement, that wording is chosen very carefully because there's no indication of which system is being used to deliver that optimism. And I think if you show this next slide, there's a very good reason for that. It's about outcomes. So good pensions, as it says, increase employee commitment, and it's something that we say quite often. A defined contribution plan is ultimately a defined benefit plan as well, and it's because you are trying to deliver an outcome. Yep. And that is the benefit. You want to be able to retire in comfort. Okay. And that's what it comes down to. So these employees who are feeling highly motivated, committed, because they feel confident about their retirement, that says absolutely nothing about whether it was defined benefit or defined contribution. And it's not, we looked to see if there was a difference between defined benefit and defined contribution, and there was a very small difference.
Yeah, I mean, as a broad picture, you could say it made no difference. We could not tell from the levels of optimism and from the levels of commitment what type of pension the person had.
Yeah.
They could have been in a defined benefit plan, they could have been in a defined contribution plan, they could have been in no plan at all.
Right.
And the effect was just the same. We saw levels of commitment across the board that made no difference what sort of pension plan they had. What made the difference was how they felt about whether it was going to work for them or not.
Right. Which on the one hand, that indicates that a lot of defined benefit plans are not communicating well enough. I mean, they're putting an awful lot of effort to provide a good retirement outcome for people, and they're clearly not communicating that adequately.
I understand. So can I ask you a question that relates to that? It links back to, I think, a slide or two before, but still relevant in this. So that the data that you have shown, the 7% in the chart, they indicate the strength of the causal link from optimism about retirement income to employee commitment.
Yep.
Yeah, that's
I
right.
think exactly that's
Yes,
exactly
that's
the point
precise,
that
yes.
you are making, right?
Yeah.
So that is
It's not how you deliver the underlying pension, it's how you deliver the optimism that matters.
okay. So it's the optimism that is relevant, and it's not necessarily the type of arrangement. I understand that, but then clearly, the next question would be, so what does this mean for plan design? How do you turn this into something real that
Exactly, yeah. I mean, the thing that you need to think about is when you're looking at designing an expat plan, or indeed a domestic plan, obviously in today's environment, most new plans going in are defined contribution in approach for a whole raft of reasons. But what you need to think about is just because it's a defined contribution plan, the objective is to provide someone with a pension, with retirement income.
okay.
And so it's almost like your design process needs to think back from the pension.
Okay.
What do we need to input by way of contributions to have a reasonable prospect of producing the outcome that's desirable, a
Right.
good, comfortable level of retirement income.
Okay.
And so the design process, you'd be looking at what contribution levels do I need to put in? Perhaps what contributions at what ages? For those of you who are familiar with the sort of like the actuarial sort of like cost of providing pensions, you can put in less money for a younger person. It will grow to be a substantial sum by the time they retire. If you're trying to start and provide someone with a pension in their 50s, you need to put more in.
Yep.
So you might therefore be having some sort of age-related contribution scale to deliver the target level of benefits, if you like.
Okay.
Obviously, there are legal constraints. There may even be cultural constraints within your business that you want to ensure equality, and an age-related contribution scale may not be appropriate for everybody. But you design your plan with the end in mind.
Okay.
Introduce investment options that are consistent with the assumptions you're using in the plan design,
Okay.
and have a range of investment options so that you've got secure options, you've got more adventurous options to cater for people with different appetites for investment risk. Have a good quality default option for those people who are perhaps not comfortable making their own investment decisions, and that's in today's day and age probably going to be some form of either a life cycle or a target dated fund, which starts off trying to get growth whilst people are younger, but then consolidates as they approach retirement age. And final thought as well is the sort of like annuitization. One of the things that Thurstan and I did as we were sort of like doing our research ahead of writing the paper, we were looking at the cost of buying annuities, and this is something that the pensions regulator in the UK has highlighted. There's something like a 30% difference between the best annuity that you might get for your money when you come to retire at 60, 65, and a mediocre player. That's before you even bring into play the very poor annuity providers. You know.
Sure.
So actually converting your investment fund that you've perhaps built up in a DC plan into a pension, that final step is a vital step, and we think it's something that employers should be helping their employees through, if only by directing them to good quality websites where you can do comparisons online and get good deals.
Okay, and that's maybe one point where I suppose two things arise with the fact that this is an expatriate pension, because there's something that's different from the other types of plan participants. Is they may be retiring and you don't know where they're going to retire.
That's right.
They may not know where they're going to retire. So when they annuitise, they're going to require assistance in the country where they're going to retire to.
Yeah.
And also while they're saving, multi-currency options and maybe even multilingual options.
Support.
For the annuity.
Are required.
Well,
but also for the saving. So I mean, if you can imagine you're being paid in dollars, but you're coming from the Eurozone, and that they face currency issues that others don't face. So the ability to be paid in dollars and save in euros or such like this is something
very important. Yes.
Well, you're actually touching on questions that are coming in. There's quite a few questions on this slide.
Yeah.
So one is on investment options, and you touched on it, but maybe you can go into it a little bit more. Is when you look at investment options and you contrast an expat plan to maybe a domestic defined contribution plan, do you need a wider set of investment options to cater for the different nationalities and backgrounds that you're dealing with in the plan?
To an extent, yes. In as much as, I mean, for example, an employee from, say, a French background might be very, very attracted to the sort of guaranteed funds that are available in French domestic plans, which offer capital guarantees and pay rates of interest. But that sort of a fund would not look attractive to a UK investor looking over the long term who thinks, well, I really need to get good long-term growth.
Yep.
He'd look at the interest rate that's being offered under a French-style guaranteed fund and say, well, that's just too low, albeit it's better than a cash investment return interest rate. But he might be looking for something a little more with a little more upside opportunity.
Okay. So yes, there's some degree of sort of higher variability,
more variation, and also there is, as Thurstan alluded to, the need to cater for different currencies to manage that foreign exchange risk. If you are expecting to retire perhaps within the Eurozone, you probably want to be investing in euro-denominated funds,
exactly.
Even though you might be working for a US company in Asia.
Sure. Okay. So that's the investment option piece, and we discussed annuities as well. And there was one question around linking that up to the analysis on commitment. So if does offering an annuity in a plan or having annuities as the norm, does that have an impact on the commitment increase that this plan generates?
We didn't specifically measure that as to the actual at that sort of like level of detail as to whether the annuity piece specifically makes a difference.
Okay.
But what you're looking at is, in order to be optimistic about retirement, if you're in a DC environment, you must have some degree of comfort that you're going to be able to convert that fund that you're building up into a reasonable level of pension.
Right.
So if your employer's saying, we have support for you at that step, so that we will help you to build a good fund, and then we will help you to turn that into a secure level of retirement income that will support you at the level you would hope to live at, that I think would be an important step in creating that optimism. But in fairness, we have not specifically tested that question.
Okay, that makes sense. Then there is another question that is linking back to, or referring to this wider discussion and also the relationship between defined benefit and defined contribution. And really the comment is that this person says he finds it or she finds it hard to believe that DB, defined benefit, would not be thought of more highly in the context of
we find it hard to believe as well.
We agree.
So,
we did find the reason Thurstan was sort of like hesitating when he first was addressing this question was there are some very specific things that we found. For example, in Germany, final salary plans, we've got a 2.5% increase in commitment specifically for people who are in final salary plans. But that's very specific to Germany. Doesn't occur in other countries.
Okay.
So there are some countries where that level of detail is there. One possibility, and this I'm purely speculating here, is that there may be a tremendous lack of understanding on the part of employees about the very nature of the pension plans that they are part of. And we would see that as a crucial failure or missed opportunity from an employer. If an employer is offering a very good defined benefit plan, they ought to be able to create a lot of optimism in their employees that they're going to have a comfortable retirement and therefore hopefully benefit from increased commitment.
Right.
But it may be a communication thing which is lacking.
Okay. And then there's another question that has maybe two components. The first is if you design an expat plan and looking at, let's say, contribution levels, would you be looking at what state benefits or other types of benefits groups of employees have? I think you spoke about that before.
Yeah.
It really depends by company.
Yeah, I mean, there is a company cultural thing here, but going at it from first principles, there is, and let's take two extreme examples about 25 miles apart, the UK and France. French state system is very good, provides a very substantial level of benefit, and the pensions market there tends to be about voluntary top-up on top of a very substantial state benefit arrangement. Whereas a UK person comes from a background where, relatively speaking, for the sort of highly paid expat person, the UK state benefit that they are used to is a very small component of what they expect to live on when they retire. So for them, if you're providing for them, you perhaps need to factor in the French person having the expectation of a relatively good state arrangement, and you're providing them with an ability to top that up to the desired level of retirement income. Whereas for the British expat, you're more or less you're funding his retirement,
right?
And so their expectations, their needs are very different. So. Looking at it from those principles, you probably need to have some sort of global framework to put in place a global plan, leverage your buying power of being a global organisation, get controls and governance at a global level, but then have the flexibility within that to reflect the expectations of your different people in different parts of your population, your employee population.
Thank you. And then there was a second component to this question is if you are, as a company, faced with this situation where you have people from different countries and backgrounds, to what extent is it fair to then give these two groups different types of benefits? Right? Is that a consideration that you see as well?
I think it's something we think is very, very important. Fairness is one of the things. If you are patently unfair as an employer, it undermines the support feeling. So there needs to be some way of demonstrating fairness. One way might be, for example, to say, again, taking the example I just outlined, that we recognise that for our French employees, there is a need for a modest top-up level of pension over a state benefit. For the UK, it's a much more substantial benefit. So you might require, for example, some sort of like employee-employer matching contribution level, so that the employees for whom you are contributing relatively less are themselves contributing less. Right. So there's a parity in that way, whereas for your employees for whom you're providing a much more substantial pension, the contribution levels for them would also be more substantial as a personal contribution to get the fairness there. But yes, I think fairness is very, very important in this.
And I think to add to that, I mean, we've also seen some companies just say we do want to be fair, and so they have a global sort of fair policy. But I think often if you scratch the surface there, you'll find out that some nationals do have to be treated differently. We're speaking to some Nordic companies, and they were saying, these people are giving up a state contribution of 18%, and we have to match that, otherwise they won't work with us. Right. So sometimes you have to do that. But then other companies say, we'll split up into hubs, and we'll treat hubs of employees differently. So we'll sort of group them into groups that are more or less the same, and we will treat them more or less the same. So I think there are pretty different approaches. Different
approaches, because of course you want to marry you want the coordination and the centralization. It's one company and a policy around that, but you also want to sort of accommodate for the
But one thing that's very important to stress is, and it's something that came up actually in a lot of discussions I've had, they've said previously we've had to negotiate one-for-one with these people, saying, well, I need to sort out my pension. If you're going to pay me extra money, I want X amount. And then somebody else comes in and says, well, I want this. And so that's another problem. And it really has been previously with a lot of companies, just individual by individual.
Right. And so from that perspective, there's a huge benefit already from having a one approach to the expats. That sort of does away with this sort of one-for-one sort of approach. Okay, thank you. Then there's another question that takes this discussion to another sort of part of this, and that's the tax aspects of expatriate plans. So Mark, can you tell us something about tax treatment, qualification, non-qualification of pension?
Thanks.
How long have we got?
I mean, it is tremendously complicated in terms of the tax treatment of expatriates. Where you retire, where you take your benefits before you move back to a home country, maybe. There are all sorts of variables in there. So it would be foolish to try to deal with all the possibilities in a couple of minutes.
And you know this from your own experience, right?
Indeed, yes. As an expat myself, I have just spent the last 12 months trying to sort out my tax affairs in the UK and Holland. So it's tremendously complicated, and it's not something that you can factor in as an employer into trying to. You can't design and cater for all contingencies. So what you can really do is focus on what you can control, and that. So you're looking at, for example, you say, right, well, we're providing a pension here. We'll try to do it in as an efficient a way as possible, but let's move away from the sort of like domestic plan thinking where tax is a large driver, particularly in the UK, for example. Tax is a tremendous driver of pension scheme design. Let's move away from that thinking and think pension design is about delivering pensions. Right. And if you can find an efficient place to hold the money, invest the money that's tax neutral, then that at least saves you one tax issue. You make that as simple as possible. But for most people, contributions into an international plan will be a taxable benefit, and in one form or another, there is a high likelihood that when taking the benefits, they could be a taxable benefit when taken. The level of tax and what is taxable can vary tremendously, from no tax at all through to tax on the whole amount taken, and all stages in between.
Well, I think that's a good compact answer to a broad area. Thank you, and that allows me to move on to yet another area that's important to discuss, and that's communication and education. Clearly, that must be an important area for this as well. Thurstan, you want to take that?
Yes, well, we just touched on communication with the issue of defined benefit plans, but it's really essential for defined contribution plans. You need to talk to your plan participants. You need to educate them on just simply what it is you're providing them, so that they can understand it and so that they can take the actions that they need to take. And then, as we've seen, if you want to get the benefit as a company from the benefit that you're providing, then you need to communicate with the members to say, this is something that we're providing for you. It is worth a lot, and it will enable you to retire in comfort. This is something that we're doing for you as a company to provide support. It's something that is not always easy to do. In fact, we were speaking with a company the other day, and they were saying they were having difficulties even getting some members for an expatriate plan just to sign the form so that they could receive a free benefit. They were not taking 7% that the company was giving them, or 7% plus, just because they hadn't signed the form. And they were being contacted and saying, please sign this form so we can provide you with your pension, and these individuals aren't doing it. So it's you have to find a way to communicate with people. You need to, as it says on the screen, you need to keep it simple. You need to explain what it is you're doing. And again, you start from the outcome. We are trying to enable you to have a benefit that will mean you can retire. You need to, in some way, make that relevant to these people. You need to say, you need to pay attention to this for these reasons. And so you need to provide examples and show them what it is you're doing for them. You not only need to be clear about what you're doing, you need to be transparent about what you're providing them with. It needs to be very clear what you are providing them with, what you're expecting them to do, and what it means and doesn't mean, especially with an expatriate employees, because they're operating in a foreign environment. It's not something that they can take for granted. So you need to be very clear about how they need to behave and what you're giving them. Okay. So that it says give a route map and help them, and then it's not fire and forget. It's not something you do when they sign their contract. You say, okay, here's your form, deal with it. It's something that needs monitoring, and it's something that you need to communicate. It's something that needs to be ongoing. Okay.
So you find communication to be important in the dealings with. Yeah. Do companies see that
absolutely.
Oh yes, yeah. I mean,
examples that you.
The forward-thinking employers who are really looking to get the value from the spend that they make on pensions, they're very aware that neglecting to communicate effectively about what benefit is that you're providing, it makes the spend on the pension almost a waste of time and money. And so we've been working with an IT company in the UK where they are very, very keen to ensure that their employees understand the benefit and focus a lot of time and energy on regular communication in various forms. I mean, as you'd imagine with an IT company, that they are perhaps more adventurous about the ways that they communicate with their staff, sort of education videos and so on, that help the members, not just sort of like boring paper copies of documents that are impossible to read. They're really focusing on communicating with their employees in a way that the employees communicate with everybody else that they do.
And in a way, I mean, what this whole survey shows is that you can get your design completely right, but if you don't communicate, then you've lost the benefit. There's that 7% of commitment that you can gain, and if you don't communicate properly, you don't get it.
And you lose that.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's I think a really strong message to have. So I think we're sort of edging and starting the sort of coming towards the end of this discussion. So Mark, do you have some final sort of insights that you can share? I think we have a slide on that.
Well, I think crucially, as Thurstan said at the outset, when you're thinking about pensions for your expat workforce, think about it properly as a pension. This is not an add-on, ad hoc, negotiated thing that you do case by case. Decide what you're going to do, think it through, think about why you're doing it, how you're going to do it, and think about it in terms of it's part of your global pension strategy that you apply across domestic plans and across expat plans.
Right.
I think certainly need to have some degree of flexibility in an expat environment, as we talked about, because of the different expectations from different cultures, and also we've got the different levels of commitment that you're trying to harness as well. You know, so be flexible to the extent that perhaps you culturally are able to do within your own organisation.
Okay.
And as we talked about already, the example of the IT company, you know, they're being really innovative in terms of how they are looking to communicate with their employees. You know, their workforce are in their sort of like 20s, 30s, and early 40s, and that's the Facebook generation kind of thing. And you know, so they use social media to talk to their employees about benefits and about pensions.
Right. Right. Okay. Well, thank you. So we have one last question. We've had actually quite a lot of questions and hopefully answered them you know, throughout the conversation. If any of you have one final question, then I'm sure we have time to deal with that. For now, there's one last one, and that's around domiciles. You know, in choosing an international retirement plan, is it important that choice? What thinking do you see among your client base?
There are a number of potential domiciles and different motivations for using different ones. Speaking purely from a sort of like a personal perspective, I'm quite risk averse, and so I find that the Luxembourg regulations around investor protection and the safety net that there is there is a particularly attractive feature of the Luxembourg environment. So providers like ourselves who are in Luxembourg, though we're not the only one, but we won't mention any other names, I certainly feel that that's a very, very good location. It also, I think, it benefits from being not perceived as being quite the, if you like, the offshore tax shelter that has lots of negative connotations with the tax authorities that perhaps some of the other locations
I think that's
have.
something I think we saw post 2008. We saw definitely a change in that people were requesting. There seems to have been a shift in perception, and some of the slightly more exotic places, people were saying, seeking assurance that their pension plan would not be in such a place. So I think there's been a shift.
Okay.
In looking for domiciles. Yeah.
All right. Well, we're going to close this webinar. Mark and Thurstan, thank you very much for your time. The paper that you've written is very interesting, and so was the discussion. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your time and attention, and the questions and engagement throughout the discussion. If you would like to contact any of us with any follow-up questions, then please feel free to do so. For now, thank you very much, and see you next time.